Let's learn how to do a model within a model. So let's start off by creating an MVC project. And we will go ahead and call this MVC project car owners. And we'll go ahead and click OK on that. That will create the car owners project. Click OK again. Project will be created. And the first thing we'll want to do is create a new database and some new tables. So let's go over to our Server Explorer and let's right mouse click on Data Connections and we'll create a new SQL Server database. And remember that you can go and get your connection string by opening up your SQL Server Management Studio. And when it first pops up, you can grab that connection string and just paste that into the server name. And we're going to call the database car owners. Then click on the OK button and it will go out there and generate that new database for you. Now we need to right mouse click on tables, add new table, and I want you to type in the following SQL statement. I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so you can see it, and I'll paste that in. And the SQL statement is create table, DBO cars. We're making a car property, car ID, which is going to be identity field, a car name, which is a varchar 30, not null, an owner ID, which is an ID null, and we're going to set the car ID up as the primary key. Make sure you make that table name cars right there. Click on update, and then click on update database, and this will go out and create your brand new table in your database. And if I came over here and refreshed my database, would see that the cars table shows up. Let's go make another table. So right mouse click on tables, choose add new table. And once again, we're going to enter in some SQL script. And I want you to do the table for the owner. Owner ID is an identity field. Owner last name varchar 30. Owner first name varchar 30. Once you type that in, click update and update the database. And then when we come back over here to our table and do a refresh on it, we should have our two tables now. And I can go ahead and delete both of those queries to create those tables. Now the way we're going to work with these tables is that we're going to say a car can have one owner and an owner can have many cars. And that's why in the cars table, we said there's an owner ID associated with that car. I'm going to go ahead and add some data to the cars table. I'll right mouse click on cars and choose show table data. And there's not any records in there, so I'll go ahead and just add some records. Notice you skipped the car ID because it's an identity field. And we'll say the first car is going to be called Camry and does not have an owner. And the second car will be a Mini Cooper, and it does not have an owner. And the last car will be a VW Bug, and it does not have an owner. So we have 3 cars in there. Once you add that data, go ahead and close that table. And we have data inside the cars table. Now that we have our cars table loaded with data, let's go ahead and start working with our Visual Studio project. And one of the things that we're going to need to do is grab our connection string and go work with the web config. So let's go ahead and highlight our connection and come down to the connection string property. And let's grab that whole connection string and we'll copy that. And then let's go back over to our Solution Explorer. And let's go to the web config file. And we're going to change our default connection to be called car owners context. Make sure you spell that correctly. And then on the connection string, we're just going to grab all that data in the connection string, delete it, and we'll just paste in the new data that we copied. And remember that this will now allow us to work with our SQL Server database we just created. Go ahead and close the web config and save that. Now let's go make our models to work with the data tables that we just created. So right mouse click on models and choose add class. And we'll call this first model cars. Click add. And then in the cars model itself, we need to go ahead and specify that it is associated with the cars table. And right mouse click on table and resolve that with the data schema. And then within cars itself, let's start building that model that we just made. So I'll specify an annotation of key, and I'm going to type the following in to my class. So I did a public int car ID, and then I did a required, and I said the following on required. And then I have a display name and the string length. Now, if you remember these annotations, this one right here says that's the primary key. The second one says that the car name is a required field, and if you don't type it in, we're going to display an error message. And when we do a scaffolding on this model, instead of using car name spelt the way it is in our model, we'll use the display name to make it look nicer. And then we also say the max length for that field will be 30. And then the last field we added was the owner ID. And we had to say that it's nullable because that's a foreign key and it might or might not have an owner. And let's go ahead and resolve our annotations by right mouse clicking on the key and choosing resolve, and it adds our data annotations. And same thing on the display name, right mouse click, and that's actually part of the component model. So everything should be resolved and we should have our model now in place. We'll go ahead and save that. And then let's go ahead and make a model for the owner. So we'll come back over to models, right mouse click, add class. And this one is going to be called owner with no S. Click add. And let's go ahead and we will type in the following code for our owner model. And I'll show this to you and explain what we're doing. So the first thing I did is I just said that the class is owner and we're going to map it to the owner table. Go ahead and resolve that error. And then we said that we have an owner ID and it can be nullable. Now the reason we're saying it can be nullable is because we have this map to the cars model and we're going to make a model within a model. And since the owner can be nullable in the cars table, we need to make it nullable in this table. We also said that it's a hidden input, meaning the end user, when you scaffold this, won't be able to see that field. There's no reason for them to see it because they'll never change it since it's a primary key. But we need that field part of the form so we can go and update the record. We also say that its display value is false, so when we do scaffold it, we don't show it. Let's go ahead and resolve both of those errors by right mouse clicking on them, choosing resolve. And then came down here and set up the other columns. We set one up for owner last name and said that it was required. Once again, did a display name on it so that when we resolve it, it will not be scaffolded in that HTML form. And here's the owner first name. We have a required message and a display name. And that is the class for the model. Go ahead and save that. So once again, here's the model for the owner, and let me explain one more time what this hidden input is doing for us. Having that hidden input with the display value of false allows us not to worry about having a value for it for a primary key. And part of that is because it's an identity field, and so we'll never have anybody type that in. The question mark says that it's nullable, and I have to do that once again because I'm going to be making a model within a model. and having both the cars model and the owner model in that. And a car does not have to have an owner. Therefore, we have to say it can be null. A little bit later on, we're going to see that we have a model state. And whenever we try to add a new owner and attach the owner ID to the car's owner ID field, the system would tell me that the model state was invalid. And so this is how I get around that, by saying that it's a hidden input with the display value. Now let's go make one more model. Come back over here to my models, right mouse click, add class. And this time I want to create a model called cars, plural, owner. Cars, owner. And this will be the models within the model. Go ahead and click add. And what we need to do here is simply come in and we need to add both of those models that we just created inside of this model. So there's our public cars model and our owners model. Now remember, when you make a model, this is the class name, this is the variable name. You cannot make them the same name. They have to be different. Case matters also. If you make them the same name, then Learning Suite's going to puke on you and you're going to get errors and it's not going to work out very well for you. The other thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a couple more using statements. And so I'm just going to come in over here and type in both of those using statements for the data annotations and for the schema. Now, you're not going to be able to scaffold this. And the reason you can't scaffold this model is because these are not truly mapped to tables. So now that we're done with those models, let's go ahead and save our project. And we can close those models. And we'll go ahead and move on to the global ASAX file. Now let's go ahead and modify our global ASAX file. And we'll come into our global ASAX and we'll add the following line to work with the database. And this will say that we're going to work with that cars owner context that we just created and work with database. Now you can right mouse click on database and resolve, bringing in the data entity, but that you won't be able to resolve the cars owner context yet because we still haven't made that class. What we will want to do though is we'll want to come over to our using statement and use our models and go use the new folder that we're going to create. So go ahead and type in these two lines which says use the models in our project, and let's go use a folder called DAL, which we'll make in just 1 second in the project. Once again, remember, this will not compile right now because we still have to go make the cars owner context class. Go ahead and save your project, and the next thing we want to do is come over to our project, right mouse click on the project itself, car owners, and add a new folder. And we're going to call this folder DAL. And within DAL, we want to create a brand new class. So right mouse click, add. And you can't see it down below, but it's going to say class. I'll do new item so you can see it here. And we'll just choose class. And we're going to call this class car owners. Cap lock is on. Car owners context. Click add. And then we need to go and now set up our car owner context class to look like the following. First thing we need to do is we need to tell it that it is part of the DB context class. So we say car owner's context is of type DB context. Let's go ahead and resolve that. And there's our new cars owner context we just set up now. And then we set up two DB sets. Let's resolve those. Now remember, your DB sets actually refer to the tables, or we could say to the models within this project. And remember, the models we said map to the tables. So we're simply saying that we have a DB set of car models and a DB set of owner models, meaning that we can hold multiple records of those type. And let's go ahead and save that project, and now we can go ahead and build since we have everything in place. So build your project. We don't have any errors, so we're happy. And the next thing we need to do now is start working with our controllers and views. Let's go modify the landing page by clicking on Views, Account, Views, Home. Index is the one we want to work with. And I'm going to go ahead and grab everything inside of this view. I'm going to replace it with the following. So I have a razor for the view bag saying home page. We're working with the Jumbotron. We say card database tracker, and we add a div to it with the row, and we work with our bootstrap and our grid, and we say cars, and we put a link on there that says if they ever click on list cars, we're going to go to the index action method in the cars controller, and that'll be our new index view for the home controller. We'll go ahead and save that. And now let's go ahead and go up to controllers and right mouse click on it, and let's do add new scaffolded item, and we're going to do an empty controller, and go ahead and click add, and we're going to call this controller cars controller. Click add, and this will be a strongly typed view, and then we need to go ahead and go to the controller index, and within this whole controller we need to add this line which says we need to create a brand new variable called DB of type cars owner context, and in order to get that to work we need to go ahead and resolve and bring in our DAL, and we need to also add our models, and we need to add data entity, and go ahead and type in right here so I went ahead and added our car owner's model in the using clause, and then down here in our index controller, when we access that controller we want to go to the index view, but we want to go ahead and return what's inside of the car database. So we can say db.car.toList, parenthesis, and this will now go out to the database, go to the DB set car, and we'll grab all the records from it and return that back to the index. So the whole job of this will be to display the list of cars. Now go ahead and come into this view and right mouse click and choose add view. And we're going to go ahead and leave that name index, and we're going to go ahead and leave empty without a model. And then we'll go ahead and click add. And then we're going to go ahead and type in the following information within this model. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to say that it is going to use a model, and we're going to use the car owners.models.cars model, and we already have our view bag in place, and then I want to type in the following information in that model, or in the view. First thing we're going to do is I have an H2 header tag that says attach an owner to the car, and then I make a table in there, and within the table I set up a table row and a table header, and I say let's do a razor action HTML, and let's go out, or a razor helper HTML, and go out and do a display name for, going to the model and grabbing the car name. Now remember, back in our models, this will now come over here, and there's the display name, and so it will return the word car name to that view when it goes to display it. And so we have our table header in there, And then within there, we also have our razor for each. And we're going to say for every item in the model that we just received, which was the cars model, we're going to go ahead and create another table row, and we're going to do a detail, and we're going to say use this HTML helper to go out and do a display for the car name. Now it's going to allow us to type in the car name. And then we have a link associated with that. Let me show you what that full link looks like. And it says it's an HTML action link that says it's going to have the words add owner. And if you click on add owner, we're going to go ahead and go to the add owner method or action method. Now, since I didn't include a controller, it's going to look in the same folder where this resides, which this resided in the cars controller. So this will look for the add owner action method in the cars controller. And then we're going to say let's pass it a parameter. We'll call that parameter ID, and we're going to go ahead and pass it the item, which is our model item, and we're going to pass it the car ID that we're looking at. And this will go to that new action method, add owner. Now that we're done with that view, go ahead and save your project. And now we need to go back to the cars controller, and we need to add a new action method for the add owner. So back in the cars controller where we had our index, I just wrote a new action method, and it's called add owner, and it says it's going to receive a parameter called ID, and it's nullable, meaning that we might or might not receive a value for that parameter. And we say if the ID is equal to null, we're going to go ahead and return this status code. And we're going to go ahead and resolve that, which is our system.net. So right mouse click on the HTTP status code, resolve. If it's, and that gets us out of that action method. Otherwise, if we did receive a parameter, then we're going to create a brand new variable called car owner of type cars owner, and we instantiate that object by calling the constructor. And then we say, let's go ahead and go to the car owner object, which remember, the car owner object was part of that model that said it was the model within the model. So if you make an object of type cars owner, it has a link to an object model called cars and a link to another object model called owners. So over here, back in that controller, and we said car owner.cars, we now can do that because there's a cars model inside of the car owner model. And so we say for the car owner model and the cars model inside of that, let's go ahead and assign it the database.car, and let's go search for that ID that we received as a parameter. Now remember, let's go back to that index we were working with. We said if you click on this action link back in the index for the cars, we were going to go to the add owner method, and we were going to pass it a parameter, and we were going to actually pass it the car ID for the record that we were looking at. So the record that we were looking at, car-wise, comes in as a parameter. We go and find that record. We return the entire record back to the cars model in the car owner model. If we didn't find it, we get out. And if the owner ID is null, then we're going to go ahead and redirect to another method called car owned in the cars controller. And otherwise, we'll go ahead and just view that car and look at all the information. In other words, we would see the car owner ID part of that. Well, remember, none of our objects, none of our cars that we added had car owners yet. So now with this action method in place, let's right mouse click within there and we'll choose add view. And we're going to go ahead and leave the name add owner. We'll say empty without model, and we'll click add. And we'll go ahead and pick this up in the next video.